Hi, my name is Grace Wells Bonner and I'm a designer.
Hi, my name is Horace Ballard, and I'm a curator.
From David Zwirner, this is Dialogues, a podcast about artists and the way they think.
Just understanding how close your clothes are to the body and what that means, but also how clothing can really embody the intentionality that's put into it and put into making it. So I feel like that's already held within the stitching and within the cloth.
I'm trying to make an argument about kind of like an ethical frame of mind toward visual material practice at a moment or in an artist's work. And so for me, I think about intentionality deeply, starting with core objectives, starting with key works and building out from there.
I'm Helen Molesworth, your host for this season. Every episode features a conversation with artists, curators, writers, designers, philosophers, filmmakers, and musicians about what it means to make things today. Hi, everybody. For anyone following fashion in the past few years, Grace Wells Bonner is a talent that's loomed large from the moment she graduated from Central St. Martin's. I had the privilege of interviewing her alongside the brilliant Horace Ballard, who is currently a curator of American art at the Harvard Art Museums. Both are deeply invested in the way clothing intersects with other art forms such as photography, sound, and poetry, all of which made for a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Grace Wells Bonner and Horace Ballard, I'm so happy to have both of you on the podcast today. Grace, you have an exhibition up at the Museum of Modern Art. You've organized a show called Spirit Movers, and it comes with an accompanying book called Dream in the Rhythm. The book and the show are really different in very beautiful ways. Grace, it was you who asked that we bring Horace on, so I'm really glad to have both of you. Grace, you got to go digging in the crates at MoMA, and you chose an assortment of objects and sculptures and photographs, drawings. You very consciously eschewed what we might refer to as like any, huge canonical item, a blue chip painting. I mean, it's MoMA. It's filled with like some of the most famous images that many of us carry in our mind's eye with us. And you really tacked toward other things. In many ways, I ended up thinking that the show sort of revolved around this rather extraordinary presentation for me of Terry Atkinson's 1995 piece called The Last Trumpet. Horace, and what you've written about Grace's show, and Grace and the title of your show, and throughout moving in the show and moving in the book, you both use the word spirit. And so I wondered if we might begin by both of you saying what spirit is, or what it can do, or why you feel, both of you, the need to evoke it now.
One of the reasons I was really excited to also bring Horace into this conversation as someone that's inspired me so much and inspired also my thinking around the spirit in art. There's an amazing essay that Horace wrote, Fear and Trembling of Visionary Art and the Search for the Spirit. That was something that really guided my research into thinking about this exhibition. And I guess as a designer coming into an institution like MoMA, I guess I felt I had some license to interpret things in my own way. And so I was bringing something of myself and maybe a sense of irreverence to this opportunity and to the exhibition. But I think when I was thinking about spirit in relation to this exhibition, it was about this idea of channeling something, a purity of expression, a kind of a way of moving material, but also thinking about immaterial gesture as well. So I think I was interested in artists that connected to this idea in different ways. And actually, one of the artists that stands out when I think about this was Minnie Evans, who was a visionary artist, and she would see these visions and be very directly channeling something into what she was creating. So that felt like a very immediate expression of something moving through or moving to you to create. But also I was thinking about what gets embedded in materials, and the kind of resonance around the intention of creating something and how that takes up space. So these are some of the things I was thinking about when I think about spirit in the exhibition.
Horace, what about you?
I think for me, spirit is an intangible property very similar to wind in that we know it exists, we know it's there, but it's, as Grace was saying, it's a movement and it's a tension. Spirit moves and animates things, objects, people, rituals. Um, we talk about the spirit moving, we talk about the spirit flowing, we talk about spiritual awakenings, we talk about acts done in the name of and through and because of spirit. But it is something that's a bit of a confluence and a bit of a kind of non-finitum, something that cannot be captured. Before I turned to art history and decided that being a curator for at least this part of my life felt like something that I could give and do. I was trained as a priest. I went to divinity school, and before that, I trained as a scholar of 18th and 19th century British Romanticism. I thought I was going to be a Wordsworth scholar when I was very young. And so for me, the spirit has always been front and center. It is the thing that connects. It is the thing that, even in moments of disagreement and distress, it is the thing that my people, my family, can come back together through and around, even as the spirit can be acknowledged but might move us to different things. Grace's work is extraordinary to me. I know of no other designer who thinks about tension of color, tension of drape, tension of nuances and citations. And I believe, and Grace, please correct me if I'm wrong, it was the fall winter 2014 show Ebonics that
Yeah.
it was a revelation. And then the fall winter 2017 show Spirituals 2, I just breathe into those collections. I thought, here is a designer who gets the animus of a kind of post-colonial diasporic linkage through spirit, through material, that is transformative for the world. That Renaissance and Elizabethan references can live alongside Jamaican dancehall culture. It just felt so alive and recognizable for those of us in diaspora. And it deeply moved me. And I think in many ways it has fueled me to continue in my role now to probe and kind of unveil the spirit in grand manner portraiture of the 18th and 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read something, Horace, that you've written to see if we can even keep going, because both of what you've said is so beautiful. You wrote, to say that spirit is visible in a work of art is, quote, to claim the conscious investment in the project of intimacy. And I was interested in like all of those words, conscious investment, project of intimacy, right? Like those are really interesting words. And I wondered if, Grace, if you could talk about the relationship of intimacy in making clothing and also in the curatorial work you've been doing, because there is something about the type of object you choose, modest, incredibly handwork.
I think the intention around making, the devotion of making and craft, and even repetitive gestures and that are embedded within making, there was a celebration of that very intimate act and immediate act of creating in the exhibition. And I think that connects with my own approach to design and making and interest in craft traditions from all over the world, really. I think a lot of what I try to do with Wells Bonner is about bringing different ideas of craft in relation with each other and valuing those equally and potentially creating new hybrids through those forms. And I think that seems to be something that I also bring to curating, is putting these different ideas and artworks together with the same value. But I think if I think about intimacy and Wales Bonner, some of the first shows I worked on, like the Ebonics collection that Horace mentioned, I had such a close relationship with the models that I was working with. So they were friends, and the process of design and creation was very collaborative. It would be a conversation. I'd be designing things and having fittings with them, but then asking them, how does this make me feel? I was being directed by that relationship. So there was a real closeness in the creation process. And I think I was trying to show, I guess, my understanding of beauty that was so familiar and personal and close to me and the people I knew and in my family. And I was trying to just open that up within fashion, and show something that was very familiar to me. But I do feel this idea of intimacy and closeness is definitely a theme that comes up in my work. Just understanding how close your clothes are to the body as well, and what that means, but also how clothing can really embody the intentionality that's put into it and put into making it. So I feel like that's already held within the stitching and within the cloth.
Is there then something for both of you about spirit that is linked with intentionality?
When I think of spirit and intention, say my work as a curator, I think differently about my intentions and the flow or the confluence of ideas that go into what, say, semi-permanent galleries for our collections look like versus what special exhibitions look like. Those are different intentions, different modes of animated conversation and encounter. And in one form, I think the realm of the spirit for me is more lyrical, more musical, and the other one is actually more poetic, kind of like an epic. I'm trying to make an argument about kind of like an ethical frame of mind toward visual material practice at a moment or in an artist's work. And so for me, I think about intentionality deep, starting with core objectives, starting with key works and building out from there in adjacencies and tensions that feel generous but constructed, knitted, sutured together. And in my mind, I think about that. I can't help but think about the rabbi, I believe Abraham Herscher, who in the 60s, 70s wrote this wonderful book, Man in Search of God and God in Search of Man. And I realized that for me, the spirit is not just something that comes upon us. We have to be open to it. We have to place ourselves in positions and in relationship so that a third thing can happen. We have to consent to it. And I think that that's been so compelling for me as an idea and has borne out in my own walk through this world, and one that I do try to bring to the gallery space, whether it's permanent exhibitions or special exhibitions, is a deep intention and an openness to be engaged, encountered, and changed.
That's really beautiful. The idea that that one would have to be ready. Like I said in the beginning, I felt it was at a certain point, I thought, my gosh, this is a room designed to ready you for the last trumpet. Like, this is a room to sort of get you as a viewer to completely understand the haptic, visual impossibility of these trumpets that just go up, 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 all the way to the ceiling. I read somewhere that Atkins said that he made them that big because he thought that would be the scale that they would need to be for angels to play them. Do you have that same sense of needing to be prepared or readied for either spirit or the work you want to do, or to have your clothes have the legibility that you want them to have?
I think with the exhibition, it was coming back to like a key idea that continues to fascinate me, which is how sound could be manifested in other forms. And I think, or how it could be captured visually. And I think Terry Adkins is an artist that has helped me to understand that challenge. And so The Last Trumpet was a work that was very fundamental in thinking about the exhibition. So I think yeah, it was an opportunity to explore that shifting and that translation through the collection, but it's definitely something that is yeah, very continuous, and kind of an impossible task. So that's why it's so fascinating to me. And the book Dream in the Rhythm was also exploring this, how sound could be captured through photography and through traces of performances. And so I was interested in exploring that idea purely through the photographic collection. Often a lot of multidisciplinary inputs that come into the research process. But then I was quite interested in filtering down those things into very specific mediums to explore that. And I'm glad that you kind of said the exhibition and the book feel very different, because the book was intended to be a companion to the exhibition, but it's really about exploring this theme through photography and through poetry. So I kind of wanted to show that you can experience an idea through different mediums. So whether that's purely through a publication and image and text, or whether that's purely through sound, which would be a playlist that supports the exhibition, or through the experience of the exhibition itself.
If I remember correctly, kind of across at a healthy regard of a distance is the incredible Agnes Martin Friendship, with that gorgeous gold leaf veneer that just is riotous and quiet, and it's like a disco ball. And I loved seeing it. I don't know if you remember, Grace, but when we walked through with
Yes.
Michelle, I like gave a gasp. I was so happy to see her there, and I was so happy to see her regarding but holding her own, but also giving over space to the beautiful works in the room, including the Terry Atkins. And her work reminded me, just kind of like, from one side it's very matte, from the other side it's very brilliantine, and it's just all those, that sparkling iridescence becomes porous, and you can look through it and around it and from it. But it reminded me also of kind of like the cross-hatched grid that sometimes is drawn out on a work table in a studio. It also reminded me of the way that you have used at times crushed velvet in your collections and in your garments, the way that velvet catches, throws light, the ways that, you can wear it in the daytime and it takes on a very different semblance, a very different contour than it does at night, under warm light, harsh light, black light. It was such a rigorous, generous opportunity to think about both influences, but also these really beautiful kind of valences, meaning around intimacy, around intentionality, around what is worked, surfaces that are worked, and how something that's really rich and saturated with meaning also can become normative, also can become the fabric of the everyday. Like friendship, it is the highest, most beautiful virtue, right? And also, for those of us who are blessed with deep friends, it is the easy wash and wear fabric of every day, and that was such a gorgeous, gorgeous passage of the show, I felt.
Beautiful.
I was so thrilled that you raised the companion catalog and you're drilling down, in a way, editing down to photography, because I thought a marvelous array of heterogeneous things, and then the accompanying book was actually quite disciplined. Grace, you have said photography has basically built my understanding of style. I took that from another interview that you gave. And Horace, you've written, it is the worst kept secret in culture that sculpture, fashion, and the photograph are the same boy in a new wig. And you've spelled boy B-O-I. So, so here are two wonderful quotes about photography. And I wondered if you might just expand a little bit, especially because now we have a kind of an endless stream of digital images, and yet the images that you've chosen for your book, Grace, are black and white, silver gelatin prints made from a celluloid negative. And so I wondered if you would just talk about its profligateness in terms of Horace, or maybe the way in which we are instructed in a thing: fashion, beauty, style, history, through the mechanism of photography long before we ever come to think about what is a photograph.
In terms of what I said about understanding of style, like I think it's about these immaterial gestures in the way that people wear clothing. I guess I'm thinking about Black style, and I remember having this conversation with Arthur Jafer and thinking about Black style in a way of wearing something. It's a kind of an invention, like a jazz musician finding a new way to play an instrument. It's not like he may not have invented the instrument, but in terms of the way of playing, like that can create a whole new style. And I think in terms of my understanding of style, I'm really drawn to what's intangible and an attitude and how style is created. And again, that's something that is quite hard to pin down, and because it's a kind of transformation, even if what someone might be wearing could be quite, I guess, mundane in a way. There's something about this embodiment that is really powerful. So that as a starting point for design has an interesting tension to it. But I think, photography is, as I said, I've recollected and understood things through photography from different generations, and I've used photography to trace things that maybe my ancestors would have seen, but I might not have seen with my own eyes. So I think it's a very important tool for me and the kind of foundational aspect of my research, practice, and understanding of Black cultural heritage.
I think for me, formally, sculpture, the photograph, and garments, although fashion is so much more than garments. It's a business, it's a theater, it's a process, it's a labor. It's also a journey that follows us throughout our lives, whether we're conscious of it or not. But for me, sculpture, let's say dress or garment, and the photograph, they're all working with ideas of dimensionality and form. They're working with and against ideas of perspective and a facet of something. We never can see the entirety of the form of the artistic choice and the idea that led to that artistic choice to snap. A sculpture compels us, animates us, intrigues us to want to think about, where am I in space in relationship to others, to it? Can I walk around it? Is it engaged? Is it totemic? Is it something I can look over? And so for me, those formal questions are shared between them. And I also really respond and want to kind of like full body nod to Grace's sense that photography for me, my father is and during my childhood was an extraordinary photographer, though I don't know if he would think of himself as an artist in that way. And those photographs, those glimpses, those fragments mean as much to me as, say, going through my closet and pulling out an old pair of jeans he used to have, or a hat from my grandfather. They cling us. They're like scaffolds up the mountain of a life. They can hold us to ourselves, to our histories, to our past. We return to them and see new things. And in that way, it is kind of like a song or a poem, isn't it? When we return to it, having lived a bit more, they hold us a bit more.
Both of you have talked about a kind of boundary crossing of sound. Sound as a way of feeling, sound, what does sound look like? What are the sonics of art? I think, Grace, some of your clothing has very powerful evocations of sound, whether it is, as Horace already mentioned, a kind of Jamaican dance hall look, or even this the crushed velvet, a kind of 70s disco. This concern with sonics in art, in visual art in particular, I think is something that a lot of people are thinking about. And Grace, you've mentioned Arthur Jafa, who has very now famously said he wanted to make visual art that was operating at the level of the experimentation and spirit and form of Black music. Tina Kempt has written about the kind of the sound of images. The quote-unquote historian in me is always searching for the why now of things. Like, what is it about this moment that we're all living through that has necessitated that we think synesthetically, that we try to understand what it is, what is the sonics of the visual, so to speak. And I'm curious if either of you have a sense of why now? What do we need from this discourse that so many of us are circling around so productively? Because it's clearly like fecund, like it's generating all of this really amazing work.
It's a great question. I think I can't say why now. I think for me, it's been like a continuous source of inspiration and study because it feels like it's hard to pin down. So it's something that you can gather material around. I mean, for example, trying to understand the sound of a sound system, I might translate that through looking at what people are wearing, how they're moving, the kind of gestures around that, the textures, the colors, the information that I can gather through photography. So I think it's a bit of a puzzle, but something that is quite. I think I'm always drawn to an idea that is more of a recollection. So I think in terms of like historical accuracy and specificity, I like to create space for imagination. There needs to be a good amount of space for imagination and creative play. So it's about these fragments of something. So I guess in that sense, sound can invite that sense of imagination and filling in gaps. In the same way that I'm drawn to poetry because there's an expansiveness that allows you to piece things together visually around that. I think I'm drawn to creating worlds that are formed through fragments and recollections.
And the works you chose for the MoMA show, one of the things that they shared was that when you looked at them, you could tell what they were made out of and how they were made. The photographs in the MoMA book, so many of them speak to the 40s or the 70s, historical periods. And I wonder if is part of what the sonics allows you to do is gather the past in some way?
I guess I'm very much thinking about an overlapping of time, of past, present, future. And I do actually think that the work I do is future oriented or even thinking about an ancient future. And I think sometimes people could see that my approach is quite nostalgic or something, but I don't think that is really the intention. I think with the MoMA exhibition in terms of materials, I think I was looking for materials that I felt had some magical potential, magical resonance, or even sonorous qualities like ability to make sound, but also a lot of the materials marked a passing of time in them through like patinas or through a repurposing of materials as well. So I think time is definitely a very important theme, and I do feel an irreverence to time in a way. Like I feel I'm quite playful in putting different eras in relation with each other, and it's quite a maybe collaged aesthetic that overlaps these different elements. But I actually think that I'm very working towards a new horizon in terms of how I think and how I create, and it's as much about that New Horizon is about almost being like a conduit of moving forward or shining a light on certain things from the past, but with a different perspective.
Mm.
It's interesting how the language of our music, broadly speaking, in the last 20, 30 years, allows for these associations with something more tangible, like sampling, cutting, mixing. Um, it is amazing that that has gone out from maybe very small subcategories of culture, to a kind of larger embedded understanding of who we are in a kind of postmodern or materialist moment. It is amazing, I think. Grace is such a conduit across and between time. It is also amazing that I think we are living in a moment when people are realizing collectively, maybe even at the speed of which culture metastasizes, that we can't trust what we see
Mm.
alone. We can't trust maybe even what we hear alone.
Mm.
And so for me, it becomes kind of intuitive to want to rely on other experiential capacities that we all have, and not for all, but for those who are blessed to do so, sound and sight together allow one, I think, more ably to place or locate or make proximate someone else's experience to their own. That begins to get at maybe not the truth, maybe not facts, but empathic response, maybe.
That's really beautiful. I want to thank you both so much for coming and talking with me today about this beautiful show and book.
Thank you so much for having me, and Horace as well. Always such a pleasure to hear your voice, and just such a blessing to just hear how you think. It's really incredible.
Helen, this was an honor beyond honors. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Dialogues is produced by David Zwerner. If you like this episode, please follow, rate, and review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really does help the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you join us here next time.